4:58 local, Udeid Air Base cutter. The ramp lights hum, the desert wind is warm, and the sky looks harmless. But in 11 minutes, that same sky transforms into a locked cage of fire. 48 inbound threats. What unfolds next will decide whether the Gulf fractures or holds. The air feels thick enough to chew. On the far side of the base, dorm lights flicker as people wake up, confused. On the near side, armed security teams move like shadows between barriers and HESCO walls, closing gates you didn't know could close. The runway looks the same, but now it's a bullseye painted in heat. In the CAOC, a senior air battle manager forces his voice into a steady cadence. Headings, altitudes, time to impact. Liaison officers from partner nations lean over the same glass tables because a shared track is the only argument that matters. A mistake here isn't a paperwork error. It's a crater with names. You've got 11 minutes. What do you do first? Protect the jets? Protect the people? Or protect the command node that ties them together? The first sign isn't an explosion. It's color. Inside the Combined Air Operations Center, a digital map goes from green to amber to red, spreading like a bruise under glass. The warning tone rises and refuses to stop. In the real world, Udeid's CAOC coordinates multinational air power across the region, and a combined air and missile defense operations cell exists to share threat warnings and coordinate responses with partners. In this fictional scenario, that integration is the first weapon fired. Imagine you're standing on the flight line as the siren starts. Your boots stick to the concrete. You taste dust. You smell JP-8. You hear a forklift beep once, then stop, as if the driver's instincts just cut the engine. The first call doesn't go to fighters. It goes to airlift. 3 C-17 Globemaster IIIs sit nose into the wind, tails open, ramps down, giant gray mouths ready to swallow anything that keeps a war from collapsing into panic. Crews sprint from alert quarters, half-zipped in flight suits, helmets half-clipped, checklist cards damp in their hands. C-17 crews, full combat alert, launch-ready posture, prepare rapid lift of critical sustainment and personnel. The C-17 is logistics made physical. 4 F117-PW-100 engines rated at 40,440 pounds of thrust each, a crew of 3, maximum payload 170,900 pounds, and the ability to operate from runways as short as 3,500 feet. It can even back and execute a 3-point star turn on narrow pavement to align for departure without waiting on a tug. Tonight, those numbers aren't specs, they're escape routes. You climb into the cockpit and your hands go to switches you've touched 1,000 times. Battery on, APU start, engine start sequence. The loadmaster's voice is calm, but his eyes keep flicking toward the horizon. Could you taxi toward a runway knowing it might be targeted before you rotate? 2 time zones east, the adversary believes you won't even get that chance. Outside Tehran, in a fictional strike cell, planners watch a countdown clock and telemetry scrolling like casino numbers. Their objective isn't conquest, it's credibility damage. Create command confusion, trigger sensor blackout, and force partners to question whether the US umbrella is worth the risk. In this fictional strike cell, the pressure isn't just military, it's political. A senior commander has promised results by sunrise, something dramatic enough to survive in headlines and strong enough to shake a coalition. Failure isn't a memo. Failure is removal. So their plan is built to look inevitable. Overwhelm first, explain later. They program the ballistic missiles to arrive first, forcing high-altitude defenses to commit. They schedule the cruise missiles to arrive in the distraction window, low and late, when operators are already juggling decoys. And they push the drones ahead in ragged clusters, not to kill, but to contaminate the picture with doubt. Their raid is layered on purpose. 14 medium-range ballistic missiles for speed and shock. 16 cruise missiles programmed low to exploit clutter, and 18 one-way drones designed to flood screens and bait expensive interceptors. They believe the defenders' weakness is time. For 90 seconds, that belief feels true. For a moment, the strike cell watches their own screens and smiles. Tracks are moving, timers are counting. In their minds, the Gulf is about to become ungovernable. They don't realize that the defenders' real advantage isn't a single interceptor. It's information dominance. Here's what they didn't account for. The combined defense cell at Al Udeid exists to share threat warnings and coordinate air and missile defense responsibilities across partners. In this scenario, it compresses decision time until geography stops mattering. Surprise doesn't die in a speech. It dies in a data link. The first cue arrives from above the atmosphere. Launch flashes seen as needle-bright thermal spikes. The CAOC track file blooms before the enemy's boosters finish burning. 5 hours, 0 minutes, 11 seconds. Initial cue. 5 hours, 0 minutes, 24 seconds. Classification: ballistic. 5 hours, 0 minutes, 39 seconds. Secondary sensors begin correlating low-altitude anomalies. Cruise missiles trying to arrive late. 28 seconds between possible and confirmed. That's less time than it takes to send a text, and it's the difference between orderly sheltering and people caught in the open. The base wakes up violently. Shelter doors slam. Security forces sprint to choke points. Medics roll trauma bags into hardened bays. Fuel trucks reposition because fuel in the wrong place becomes a weapon. On the flight line, the loudest sound isn't the siren, it's discipline. Marshals wave glow wands, clearing lanes. A weapons troop yanks a safety pin and reinserts it, checking twice. Somewhere, a young airman whispers a name into his sleeve and keeps running forward anyway. Layered defense is not one shield, it's a stack. Space warning, discrimination radars, high-altitude intercept, terminal intercept, fighters, and point defenses, each one buying seconds for the next. THAAD takes the high end in this fictional stack. Open source reporting describes THAAD as employing hit-to-kill interceptors, engaging targets around 150 to 200 kilometers, with a battery structured around roughly 90 soldiers, 6 truck-mounted launchers, and 48 interceptors, 8 per launcher, linked by tactical fire control and communications. THAAD's eyes are AN/TPY-2, a missile defense radar operating in the X-band, designed to detect, track, and discriminate ballistic missiles, separating warheads from debris. It can operate in forward-based or terminal mode. In this scenario, terminal mode matters because objects are descending and the clock is shrinking. You're behind the radar crew now. The display isn't a missile, it's a branching tree of probabilities. 504, first re-entry vehicle tightens into a clean track. Commit. THAAD, shoot. The interceptor climbs like a spear into darkness, meeting the warhead where math says it will be. Up high, a white wink, then a track disappears. 48 becomes 47. The hardest part isn't the first intercept. It's keeping discipline after it, because every launch you authorize now steals from the next wave. The CAOC starts speaking in inventory terms. How many interceptors remain on each launcher, how long a reload cycle might take, and which assets must be protected even if it means letting lesser targets pass. On the perimeter, short-range defenses come alive. Jammers, guns, and counter-UAS teams working the low airspace where drones try to slip through. You don't hear most of it over the siren, but you see the proof. Small, quick flashes at low altitude, like someone striking matches in the dark. But the low flyers are the knife. Cruise missiles are designed for late arrival. They hide in clutter, aim at fuel and maintenance, and try to create a ground firestorm that grounds sorties. Offshore in this scenario, Aegis ships contribute sensing and engagement. AN/SPY-1 is described as a multifunction phased array 3D air search radar with 4 fixed faces providing 360-degree coverage, supporting detection, tracking, and discrimination for air and missile threats as part of the Aegis combat system. 2 destroyers shift posture. Their combat information centers stop talking about contacts and start talking about commit criteria. Engage confirmed, cruise. 2-shot doctrine, maintain intercept discipline. Vertical launch cells thump, and paired interceptors arc outward over black water. Above cutter, fighters add another layer. In this fictional night, F-35s are already airborne on combat air patrol, feeding a fused picture into the network. The AN/APG-81 AESA radar is described as the cornerstone of the F-35's sensor suite, supporting long-range air-to-air and air-to-ground modes and enhancing situational awareness. In this scenario, that means pilots receive prioritized truth instead of raw chaos. An F-35 pilot calls a sea skimmer popping above clutter for a terminal run. He doesn't dogfight it. He takes the shot. Missile away. A beat of silence. Then a bloom where a cruise missile used to be. If you're in a bunker right now, do you know the difference between an intercept and an impact? Or do you flinch either way? The drones arrive next. Cheap, loud, disposable. Their purpose is not lethality. It's distraction. They want you to burn your magazine on targets that cost less than the interceptor chasing them. This is where Patriot becomes the grinder. In this fictional defense line, Patriot employs PAC-3 Missile Segment Enhancement Interceptors, hit to kill, with upgrades described by the manufacturer as including a larger dual-pulse solid rocket motor, larger fins, and upgraded actuators and thermal batteries to extend reach and performance against evolving threats. Drone after drone is erased, some by missiles, some by guns, some by electronic attack chewing the air into static. 0509. The adversary pushes the second ballistic wave, hoping the decoy cloud will confuse discrimination. Inside the CAOC, a weapons director stares at the branching display. In his headset, pilots breathing, radar crews counting, liaison officers translating. The noise compresses into one question. What is the warhead? Could you pick the wrong branch and still sleep afterward? Engage Track 2-1, confirmed RV, 2 interceptors. 2 THAAD rounds climb on corrected solutions as AN/TPY-2 refines the aim point. Another harsh flash above the atmosphere, another track erased. Minute 4, first ballistic kill. Minute 7, cruise wave thinned offshore. Minute 10, drone cloud collapsing. And then, like all saturation attacks, the seam. 3 cruise missiles, masked by clutter and decoy chaos, slip through low and fast toward fuel and maintenance. You can almost smell the JP-8 before they arrive. Patriot launchers pivot like mechanical necks. 2 PAC-3 MSE rounds snap off the rails. 1 cruise missile dies instantly, hit to kill physics turning metal into vapor. The second is damaged, wobbling, still moving. An F-35 drops altitude and finishes it with a single shot. The third keeps coming. It impacts a maintenance yard in this fictional timeline, not the runway, because aircraft were moved at the last possible minute. 7 killed, 19 wounded. A medic kneels in broken glass and keeps one airman talking through breathing. The first real scream you hear isn't from the explosion. It's from the radio, a calm voice asking for litters. In the next minutes, the base's medics triage under floodlights, marking the wounded with tape and time. And the C-17, built to move cargo, shifts roles again. In aeromedical configuration, it can carry 36 litter patients and 54 ambulatory patients with attendants, turning a transport into a flying trauma corridor. And the airfield does not stop. Because while defenses are still hot, the C-17 crews are still running checklists. The loadmaster rechecks pallet locks. The co-pilot calls switches. The pilot watches the far end of the runway like it's a door that might slam shut. The Globemaster taxis, heavy and deliberate. If the runway is cratered now, the base loses options. Takeoff power, rotate. The aircraft surges forward, and the wheels leave the ground while the siren still screams behind it. Relief lasts half a breath. Then the CAOC voice returns. Continue scanning, expect follow-on. Now comes the part most people miss. Missile defense is inventory warfare. Every interceptor fired is inventory spent. If you cannot reload, you eventually lose, even if you win every engagement for an hour. That's why airlift becomes the hidden battlefield. The C-17s don't park, they spin. Ramp down, offload, refuel, reconfigure, ramp up. One aircraft configures for personnel movement, up to 102 troops when required, moving a rapid response security element to harden fuel farms and guard ammunition storage. Another carries palletized sustainment, communications gear, medical modules, counter-UAS kits, and critical spares. And on narrow pavement, under pressure, the pilot uses a maneuver most viewers never hear about. The C-17 can back and execute a 3-point star turn to align for departure on a narrow runway, saving minutes when you don't have minutes. A tactical maneuver hidden inside logistics. Minute 12, second ballistic wave erased. Minute 14, last cruise track destroyed. Minute 16, final drone removed. Less than 20 minutes, and the inbound raid is neutralized. But defense is not the end state. In this fictional chain of command, authorization moves fast. Respond, but respond with control. No civilian aim points, no ambiguity. Strategic outcome target set, operational paralysis for the attacker, kill chain collapse, sensor blackout, command confusion. In this fictional authorization, the response is framed as a controlled ladder step. Deny future launches, avoid civilian aim points, and prove the shield holds. The goal is deterrence restoration, not occupation. So the target set is built like a chain. Sensors that cue launches, communications that authorize them, fuel and transport nodes that move launchers, and storage sites that feed reload cycles. Break any one link and you buy hours. Break all of them and you buy months. And while the strike package assembles, the CAOC keeps its own fight going. Deconflicting airspace, keeping tankers and fighters separated from the defensive lanes, and ensuring that the next inbound raid doesn't arrive while everyone is looking the other way. The counterattack is designed for capability denial. That means the targets aren't the city. The targets are the system around it. Sensor nodes, command links, storage, power, and the logistics that make a missile force capable of mass fires. Fighters arm at Al Dhafra. Bombers launch into tanker tracks from far outside the immediate threat ring. Naval platforms shift into firing positions and hold in radio silence. First, information dominance. Electronic warfare pushes noise into the spectrum. Cyber actions attack relay points connecting detection to launch authorization. If the strike cell cannot trust its own picture, it cannot coordinate salvos. Second, magazine pressure. Precision weapons hit storage sites and staging areas to stretch reload cycles and shatter tempo. Third, command isolation. Hardened nodes are mission killed, power severed, communications disrupted, access routes cut. So leadership is isolated and control is dismantled. And that's where the phrase becomes the headline. Tehran burns. In this fictional scenario, that does not mean civilians targeted or neighborhoods leveled. It means the military-industrial web around the capital goes dark, communications severed, leadership isolated, control dismantled, until coordinated salvos become isolated, desperate launches. A hardened communications node loses power. A dispersal tunnel entrance is sealed. A radar site drops from the network. It's capability denial with intent. Throttle production, break the reload cycle, and strangle sustainment. Somewhere inside that strike cell, the realization lands late. They didn't just lose missiles. They lost the ability to regenerate massed fire. Back at Al Udeid, nobody celebrates. THAAD stays hot. Patriot remains elevated. Aegis keeps scanning. Fighters keep orbiting. In the medical tent, a chaplain moves from cot to cot. No speeches, just presence. A hand on a shoulder, a name spoken softly. For the C-17 crews, the night becomes a loop. Land, ramp down, offload, ramp up, start, taxi, launch, repeat, until the word night stops meaning anything. Aftermath analysis in this fictional timeline is measured in questions and answers. How many threats launched? 48. How many were destroyed before impact? 47. How many hit the base? 1. How many lives were lost? 7. Did the attacker achieve strategic effect? No. Kill chain collapse followed, and the raid failed to fracture the coalition. In our fictional aftermath, partner nation liaisons don't walk out. They lean in, because the data is undeniable. The defense held under saturation, the command node survived, and the air bridge kept running. That is how escalation gets contained, by proving that attacking doesn't create freedom of maneuver, it creates consequences. The lesson isn't that missiles are useless. The lesson is that saturation attacks are races. Offense racing to overwhelm, defense racing to integrate. When warning is shared and layers are synchronized, surprise dies. And if you were the C-17 crew chief watching jets launch while medics triage behind you, would you keep pushing sorties? Or would you shut the ramp lights off and wait for the next hit? So here's the question. If 48 threats can be reduced to 1 impact tonight, what happens when the next war brings 200 and the first targets are the sensors themselves? Which decision was most critical? Debate below. Hit subscribe for in-depth military breakdowns.